and need for change. So the fact that Aguila Saleh and Fatih Bashaga were very much associated with the last few years of paralysis, of conflict, of factionalism, etc., I think really drove momentum towards this the team that was elected. Of the four, the three-man presidency council, these are all people who were in positions before, whether Musa al-Kuni was a member of the presidency council, Abdul Lafi was elected to the House of Representatives, and Mohammad Menfi was elected to the General Electoral Congress, which preceded the House of Representatives. Abdul Hamid al-Dbeibah is new in Libyan politics. He comes from a prominent Misratan family, a controversial family in many respects. So many will be looking at Mr. Dbeibah and wondering what kind of government he can pull together at this time. Remember, this is a government that has a limited mandate. It's a caretaker government for the next 10 months. So the hope would be that he can bring together a technocratic government that can oversee that 10-month period. The worry is that it is a government that will become beholden to factionalism and patronage networks. Okay.
Karim, would you like to add something to what Mary said?
As I said before, whatever Mary says, I always agree. What she said is the most important things. We have, if you look at each one of the characters, not that of Dbeibah, but also that of Al-Kuni and Menfi and Al-Lafi, they all bring something of their own to the picture. There are flaws of which we will talk about later, but it's and according to what I think.
Arturo, would you like to add something about them?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It always gives me pleasure to return to ISPI, in particular to Med Dialogue, where I work for many years. So thank you very much. So many things have already been said about the new nominees, the new appointments. They are all right, and I agree perfectly. It will be very difficult for these new leaders of Libya to be perceived as such by those who truly hold power in Libya. And we know they are the usual names, after Aguila Saleh, Bashaga, Al-Misri, etc. So the question we must ask is, are these people willing to really delegate powers? I think, unfortunately, the answer is no. The answer is so negative because the appointed new leaders don't actually have a real coercive power. Aguila Saleh, for example, who is the president of the Tobruk parliament, has already stated that will not move the parliament to Tripoli until there are security conditions. So, and Aguila himself should allow parliament to vote freely for the approval of this new national government, and new national unity government. On the other side, Bashaga, it seems to me, that has already confirmed that cooperation with Turkey in the military field will continue. So this is totally in contradiction with the will, with the aim, with the goal of the UN mediation. As two colleagues said in a paper for Carnegie, in an article for Carnegie, the process has produced many losers, too many for an executive that claims to be a unity government. And all these actors risk becoming new spoilers. And I honestly expect a very difficult year until next December election. I think it will be difficult to get this government in power, and this could create a further overlap of political offices, new claims of illegitimacy, new polarization. So it seems to me at the moment that instead of introducing new stability. These nominees, these appointments have created a new mess. But I really hope I'm wrong.
Mary, do you agree with Arturo? Do you think, I'm curious about that, do you think that, for example, Cyrenaica is sufficiently represented in this new government?
Well, Mohammad Menfi is the head of the new president of the Presidency Council, is from Tobruk, the town in eastern Libya. He has never been a supporter of Khalifa Haftar, but he rather has had a rather ambivalent position, if you like. So many would say that there's still a chance that some engagement can happen there. Others would say that it's most likely, if engagement happens with Haftar's camp in eastern Libya, will be through Abdul Hamid al-Dbeibah. The signals so far would indicate, at least from what Haftar has told various international interlocutors, that he's not opposing this newly nominated government. Actually, if you look in the Libyan conversation more generally, no one has explicitly opposed this nominated government so far. Everyone, for the moment, is saying the right thing. Now, that's for the moment. As the weeks go by and we see this new government trying to form a cabinet, we see the politicking that will undoubtedly be part of that, that may change. We may see more explicit opposition or resistance or criticism of the new dispensation. But for now, people are saying all the right things. The understanding is that Haftar is not opposed to these new developments. Then the question is how the new dispensation might engage with Haftar, what he might demand in return, and whether that will be enough then to have the East on board, so to speak. But I think another important point here is that, again, going back to the fact that this incoming government has a mandate for 10 months. It was very striking during the presentations of the various candidates to the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum, when they were taking questions from members of the Dialogue Forum. A question that was repeated over and over again to the various candidates was, after the 10 months, will you be willing to step down as your mandate requires? And I think that question was repeatedly put to candidates because Libyans have seen over the last 6 years several entities basically staying on beyond their mandate, legitimacy questions about various entities and institutions. So there is a worry about that 10-month lifetime, if you like. What may happen during those 10 months, and at what kind of situation we may see in December? Will it be a situation that is conducive to elections being held? Will those who form part of the incoming government be willing to actually step aside when the time comes?
Yes, absolutely.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. The first thing you have to understand about what Stephanie Williams and the United Nations did is the constraints under which they have to work. And let's never forget that. When I used to say that there was only a military solution in order to have a political solution, what I meant was that unless the situation was unlocked on the ground militarily, there would not be the potentiality to have a peaceful, diplomatic, negotiated solution. The military solution occurred with the victory of the forces of Misrata and Tripoli, the help of the Turks, and so on, but only partially. Therefore, because there has not been a full defeat of one side, a full victory of the other side. It has been frozen at a certain moment. And the whole political things that happened immediately after that were allowed by this partial unlocking of the military situation, but were conditioned that, but the part of the military situation has not been solved. So Stephanie and the other people were acting under these constraints, a very fragile truce that could have been could collapse. Still today could collapse anytime and bring the country back to war. So they had to find a way to create a structure that would bypass this and allow as many players as possible to have a stake into the continuation of the diplomatic actions rather than turning into war. I think that they put all their eggs into the basket of the Bashaga Aguila Saleh because they thought that the two could deliver their constituencies. without considering that each constituency hated the other. So at the end, they didn't vote because it became almost if you see the way it was elected, it was a vote against these guys rather than for Dbeibah or his other friends. Moreover, on all of this, another danger is that we are all happy that everybody said the right things right now. But let's also remember that those who had the intention to spoil the victory of Bashaga, and there were plans not to allow the continuation in case the two were won, were caught off guard by the victory of Dbeibah. So the spoilers, we haven't seen them yet what they're going to do. That's why it is. Okay.
No, that was my question for you. I mean, the situation on the political way is one thing, but on the ground is completely different. We still have, foreign actors. It was supposed to be enact a withdrawal of the troops, the militias, let's call them like these militias, and instead we are still there. On the contrary, we have seen that there are new walls, new outposts in the Sirtic Channel, inside the country, and no one is going away. So I would like to know how, from you, Karim, how this first step for a new political phase can, be fit on the ground with all these spoilers, as you said.
There is no other way to have a unity Libyan government strong enough to control the territory and squeeze the Russians, the Turks, and the others out just by giving economic compensation to their military loss. And this is far to come. It's not going to be this government. I don't know if it's going to be the government coming after the elections. Let's not forget also that the structure that Stephanie Williams and their people created for this occasion is based also on the results of the Conference of Berlin. And this makes two things that we didn't talk much about. The fact that there are economic and security tracks undergoing still parallel, that should be emphasized and should be pushed even more now, because it is extremely important that they make progresses in these areas. This to take away any argument from the spoilers that want to use the fact that there is a lack in economic reform, that there is a lack on security progression. They have to be pushed, and they have continually work on it. Same thing is for the 5+5, the military track. The Egyptians started well, but then they lost hiatus. I think that Egypt is changing its position. So therefore, if they really push for the 5+5 and they really begin to work on that and make progress, these things can go all together to a certain point and reinforce the government of national unity to do his work. Now, this may not happen or might happen, but it is something that they have to do if they want to have a success. It's a non-ideological leadership that has been elected, or the least ideological of all the lists. And this allows them, the other side of their being unknown or their being so entangled with many things, will allow them, the Menfi, the Dbeibah of the situation, to bridge their relationship with as many constituents as possible. And this, we are going to see it in the next 100 days or 200 days, they are going to work. We're going to see if they will be able to do what they're asked to do, which is not only prepare the country for the election, I agree is the mandate, but also what the people want to see, some action in very elementary things. The water, the flow, the electricity, the roads, some beginning of civilian services, and they can do that. So there are a lot of flaws, I know, but also we have noticed something that we have noticed before. Almost all the foreign powers have moved toward searching for a political solution. This is whether this is the effect of the Biden's administration coming in, of the new signals coming from Washington, might be. But truth is that the main actors are in effect taking a position which is more open to work through diplomacy and politics. That's
Okay, thank you. Arturo, in this regard, how can, because we know that there are some spoilers here and it's clear who they are, but how can, let's call it the good international community, how can help, you know, the Libyan process to work, and what should do Europe in this case?
Thank you, Federica. I think the question on external actors is very complex question, because since the beginning of the Libyan crisis, now 10 years ago, external actors have always had a decisive influence, a decisive role. They had it when they actually started supporting revolutionaries in 2011. They continue to have it when they split over who should rule Libya. Each external power had divergent vision of Libya from the others, and then the war in Libya has always been strongly affected by the international context. Let's remember, for example, that in Libya between 2015 and 2016, Islamic State conquered 100 kilometers of coast on the Mediterranean. So we must also remember that the polarization between secular forces and the so-called Islamist forces did not originate in Libya. Is instead a product of the regional forces and the conflict between Egypt and the Emirates on one hand, Turkey and Qatar on the other. So external forces centrally have and continue to have exceptional importance in this crisis. Right now, I think Russia and Turkey centrally have a central position in Libya, as they have troops on the ground. The Russian says that the Wagner group is not affiliated with the official army, but we know very well that this is an opportunistic position by President Putin. And unfortunately, I fear that both the Russian and the Turks have come to Libya to stay, and it is unlikely that they will be able to live with the calls of the UN or with new governments of national unity. And this, I think, is the biggest problem. This is an important problem for Europe, but also for NATO, because allowing the Russians to settle in Sirte or in central Libya allows them to have a military post that also directly threaten American bases in Italy, such as Sigonella, and constitute a problem of security for the Mediterranean, for Europe, and for NATO. So, and with regard to your question about the EU, we know well how the two most influential players in the crisis, in the Libyan crisis, European players, France and Italy, have often been on two opposing fronts over the past 10 years. No? But it is true. It's true that in recent years, the European countries regained some unity through the German initiative of supporting the Berlin Conference. Now, because the approach consists of supporting a negotiated solution to the conflict by sitting all the main foreign actors involved in Libya on the same table. And the Berlin Initiative allowed you to work in mediating the crisis. The result of the Berlin Conference is positive, not so much because it solved the crisis, which is not true, but because it stole Libya's agenda from actors like Turkey and Russia, who had sought a sort of Syrian-style partition of the country, try to replicate the Astana peace process model. So the Berlin process instead made it possible to put the United States, the United Nations back at the center of the mediation. And what about the EU should do in supporting the political process? I think I agree with Karim and mentioned some political action, supporting the economy, supporting the reconstruction process, etc. I think it may be a good time for more proactive EU action. I think that the three largest countries, France, Germany, and Italy, have very obvious common interests beyond different sensitivities. Now, the EU should now exploit this sort of new political environment by taking some steps in handling the Libyan file effectively. Now, we can talk about, for example, reinforcing a unified national structure, Libyan structure, rather than entrench competing administrations. Europeans should take a more hands-on approach to blocking and isolating domestic and international spoilers, and refocusing the political track on unifying objective and supporting, for example, supporting security reforms. Now, I think that something more concrete must be done. My colleague Tarek Megerisi, in his recent paper, talked about the possibility of creating a European technical mission that transformed the EU in a sort of guarantor of some agreements that already exist. I think this is a good opportunity. Irini, for example, is totally useless at the moment. I think European technical mission could help design demilitarization protocols, build a shared security institution, integrate and demobilize militia, and monitor the implementation of the reform in general. So the mission could also help Libyans negotiate it, I think, with Ankara and Cairo over Turkish and Egyptian involvement in Libya, offering them something in exchange of a constructive engagement. I think that this could be an opportunity also for Europe, because this process will also allow Europeans to build a relation with the bodies that will need to work closely with now to manage migration and counter terrorism operation in the future.
So we have seen with Arturo the situation on the foreign shore, but one real problem here in Libya is about, of course, the division that the country has. And I'm an historian, and I've always talked about this. So Libyans in many respects are still divided, and not just in the three regions as usually one can think, but it's a more fragmented country than we can think. And so now we have the weakness of the government, of the GNA, permitted in many respects the spreading of hundreds of militias, a real constellation of militias, different in many kind, but they are there. And so now we have this political process. But Mary, this is a question for you. Which approach is needed to address this huge and serious issue?
Well, I think when it comes to the question of the security sector in Libya, we should divide it into two conversations, or two sections, if you like. One is, of course, the ongoing work of the 5+5, the joint military commission that has been working steadily since last year, based out of CERT and involving representatives from the Government of National Accord and representatives from Haftar's camp. It's expected that the 5+5 will continue their work, their steady work, but there are questions, I think, in terms of how the dynamics around the new Government of National Unity might affect the Commission and its work, because of course we're going to see a very different landscape in Libya over the next weeks and months. So questions as to how that might affect the workings of the Joint Military Commission and also possibly its internal structure. Many internationals would say that the Military Commission has been a great success so far. Some would go as far as saying it's become an institution in itself, and that is a positive in terms of its mandate, but also what it actually symbolizes. The other part of this conversation, of course, is related to the armed groups. A separate conversation to the conversation about unifying the armed forces in Libya, unifying the military. And since 2011, we've seen every transitional government in Libya has basically had to navigate that landscape of armed groups. It has to rely on armed groups for its own security, etc. And we've seen over the years different figures in different transitional governments boosting certain armed groups in Tripoli and Western Libya according to their own background, where they come from, etc., and sidelining others. And this, of course, has fed the tensions in Tripoli. There's a lot of speculation right now as to how this new government of national unity may approach this issue. Fatih Bashaga, the Interior Minister of the Government of National Accord, was praised by a lot of internationals for the work he was doing when it came to security sector reform. Tentative work, admittedly, but still it was some kind of progress. But at the same time, he, in doing that, rattled a number of armed groups in Tripoli and Western Libya. And it has been noteworthy that a number of figures in those armed groups who made their animosity towards Bashaga very clear, they seem to be quite heartened by the nomination of this new government. So I think we're going to have to wait and see how the dust settles there in terms of how this new government may navigate the power dynamics in Tripoli amongst those armed groups, and see which armed groups it develops good relationships with and which armed groups it may wish to sideline. And the fact that Abdul Hamid Dbeibah comes from Misrata, you know, the links there in terms of the armed groups in that city, the fact that Abdullah al-Lafi comes from Zawiya, another town in Western Libya with prominent armed groups, that of course feeds the speculation in terms of how this new government may navigate that landscape.
Of course, while we are talking right now, many questions are coming. I have questions for you, and I will ask you other things. But connected to the last things you were saying, Mary, there is a very interesting question here from Mitik Boduksnik. It's a very difficult name. How will the Dbeibah history of high-level service in the Gaddafi regime affect his legitimacy, both positively and negatively? Who would like to answer to this question? Mary, first you.
Well, I think it's been quite interesting to see again the reactions to the announcement of this new government. And as I said, there's been no explicit opposition, no explicit criticism. There's been a lot of talk about how these are new faces, it's a new dispensation. So that would suggest that I think people are watching and waiting. Obviously, people who are watching and waiting to see if they can engage with this new government, be nominated to this new government, have some kind of position in the ancillary structures of this government. And then others who are watching and waiting to see how much this government can actually deliver. Going back again to what Karim was saying earlier in terms of the everyday lives of Libyans now, how important that will be. I don't think that in many ways that Karim made the point that in many ways this government is not an ideological government. It could be described as colorless in many respects. The same was said about Faiz Sarraj when he took over as the head of the GNA in 5 years ago. And we saw what happened then in terms of the factionalism that engulfed that government. But I'm not sure that, of course, in certain constituencies in Libya, Mr. Dbeibah's background will be something of a provocation. But up to now, we're not really seeing that as much of the conversation as other aspects of what his government might look like.
Karim, do you agree with Mary?
Yeah. No, that's it. But it's also true that a lot among the in Tripoli, etc., they all say, okay, this guy is a businessman, he's whatever, he's a guy that does things. There's this myth around him that he will be able to do things because he has to do. He's the right character to deal with the various thugs, with the various people that have mushroomed around Fayez Sarraj, and he will while doing his interests, he will do that of the citizenship.
Arturo,
people have become cynical in a certain sense.
Okay, sorry, Karim, I lost you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I have a question for Arturo. In this situation, what could really stop the peace process? I mean, this government to work. There are some, serious issues, or do you think that it will be possible step by step, of course, with all the difficulties that Libya has, so no one, has the crystal ball here and can say anything for sure. But what could really stop this peace process?
Oh, this is the key question, because I think that Russia and the Emirates, for example, have used the current pause in fighting to fortify their position. So Turkey and Qatar have signed new military agreements with the GNA in Tripoli. Egypt is pushing to host its own security and diplomatic meetings in attempts to dismantle the process. And I think little effort seems to have been made by the UN, the US, and European states to secure commitments to the diplomatic process from these key external actors. I think the biggest problem is that there is no coercive power to force spoilers to observe the decision of the United Nations and the Libyan themselves. So this role should be done by Western countries once again. But Europe remains, as I say, in the field of soft power. While the Americans disappear from Libya for 4 years, because the Trump administration had no interest in to be involved in the Libyan crisis, in North Africa, etc. So now maybe we can rely on the lateral vision of the Biden administration. We need it. We need an active role from the United States. It is probably
Arturo? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit. We'll
Can you hear me?
Now, yes. Now, yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. No. I was talking about the role of the United States. I think it's probably sufficient that this role is political and not military role. With you, Federica and Karim, we had participated in a Brookings exercise a couple of years ago in trying to outline what could be done. And it had finally emerged that only if there was this coercive power, I don't know, a small military mission that could begin to rebuild the institution from scratch could have given new hope to Libya. Now, I don't think Biden wants to commit to this, but it will be enough if he spoke harshly to his allies, the Egyptians, Turks, Emirates, and to rivals, the Russians. I think that is enough for things to go a little better.
Karim, this is a question also for you. What do you think about the role of the United States? Tonight it's you. I'm not talking at all about what I think about the United States, so you are my guest and I will shut up. But I would like to know your ideas for if Biden tomorrow is coming at your desk and asking you what can we do for Libya as the United States, a military contingent or a muscular, in many respects, diplomacy, a soft power diplomacy. What do you see for the United States if they are really interested?
In other times, I supported the idea of having a foreign force that would act as a coercive force on behalf of a government or national unity. Now, at this point, I'm not convinced of it. I think that if the United States enacts their usual, the one that we missed in the last 4 years, the last 4 years were very strategical in this. The absence of an American administration, effectively rational in working, has been felt throughout the region. I don't know if the Egyptians, the Emiratis would have done what they have done had there been a strong American administration. I think that Biden and these people, the people that he's putting in place are good people and they are restarting the process of making policy towards the Middle East, not only regarding Libya, because Libya is too small, it's not a priority. But while they think about the Middle East, they will enact an attitude that is going to change the situation very much. And we have seen it. We've seen after Trump lost, we've seen the Saudi moving in a certain direction, the Emiratis starting talking again with the Qatari, and there are talks between Egyptians and Turks. There are talks. The whole area is reconfiguring their position, because now if the Americans are back, quote unquote, it's no joke going against them or being on their bad side. You don't have anymore your single guy Trump there that likes you because you are an authoritarian leader and you talk to him directly. Here you have an administration, you have a process, you have procedures, you have people thinking and writing and moving. It's a totally different stuff. And the first idea, we will just imagine an American president who says we are going back to think about how you deal with human rights, which is a very important thing. It's already a major signal that is sent to all these various countries that they have to stop behaving like spoilers, they have to stop behaving like warmongers, etc. And that is, I mean, it will be enough. If the Turks understand that things have changed, that they can stay in Libya only with certain conditions, or they have to leave. So the Egyptians, they have certain limits to their influence. That will be enough to order a few of the problems that are on the ground. So if this is the way the American policy goes, we are going to see a major help and support for the government of national unity, whatever it is. And I like to stress one thing. This is a government that's supposed to say 10 months. The United States and the Europeans have to decide now if they make this government work, are they going to let him run for a year or two beyond the elections, or they will still demand its resignations and the holding of elections, because elections have been called in without really thinking about it. So these are all issues that have to be undertaken in the next few days, and will clarify a lot of the situation. Because we cannot demand Dbeibah to be a prime minister as if he had 5 years in front of him to do things, and then after 10 months they have to resign. And at the same time, if you want them to stay only 10 months for sure, then let's not ask him the impossible. Just ask him to make sure that elections can be held and few basic services to the citizens can be given. And it's useless to talk about reforms or stuff that they have to do in 10 months. They're not going to do that.
Okay. Mary, Karim was talking about the daily needs of the people. We know that the situation in Libya is not very, very good, as Karim was telling us. you know, shortage of water, electricity, now the summer is coming, and plus we have COVID, and Libya has been hit by COVID also. So in this respect, in your idea, what are the priorities to the future governing body in this regard?
Well, I think, again, it's important to remember that this government's lifespan is 10 months, and Libyans know that. Ordinary Libyans are aware of that. So I think as a result, expectations of this new government are quite low in terms of, I think, ordinary Libyans are aware that there's only so much that can be achieved within 10 months. Much of what bedevils Libya in terms of the impact on the everyday lives of ordinary Libyans is a result of massive structural challenges, challenges that will take a lot of time to address. There are challenges related to the country's infrastructure, the water infrastructure, the electricity, et cetera, et cetera. So these are basically challenges that make day-to-day life a real misery for so many Libyans, but they will take a long time to actually address. So I think no one is expecting a miracle over the next 10 months, but I think one thing that should be a cautionary tale for this new government of national unity is the fact that last August and into last September, we saw large demonstrations right across Libya, in Tripoli, other towns of Western Libya, in Benghazi, other towns in Eastern Libya, and also in Sabha and other parts of Southern Libya. Many said that these were actually the biggest and most widespread nationwide protests we've seen in Libya since the uprising of 2011. And while each of those demonstrations had a distinctive local flavor based on local grievances in the towns and cities they were taking place, what they had all in common was this anger, this frustration, this discontent over what people see as widespread corruption in official circles, be that in Eastern Libya under the dispensation there, or in Tripoli under the GNA and Western Libya more generally. And I think those protests spooked both the GNA in Tripoli and also the dispensation in Eastern Libya. It was the first time that they had been challenged in that way. And both the authorities in Eastern Libya and the GNA in Tripoli tried to kind of meet those protests initially with a very robust response, which showed that they were flailing in terms of how to respond. So I think this new government needs to remember what happened in August and September, realize that those grievances have not gone away because the underlying challenges that drove those grievances have not been addressed, and to keep in mind that popular discontent could bubble up again and present real challenges for this incoming government.
In this regard, there was a question for you, very, very practical and interesting. It comes from the University of Tripoli. And the question is very simple. How we can push the people to vote in December? So I'd like to have an answer from you all. Mary, would you like to start? Ladies first.
So this is a very interesting question, and actually many people have been discussing what kind of turnout we might see in December for Libya's first national elections since 2014. And already between 2012, which is when we had the elections for the General National Congress, the first national elections Libya had experienced in decades, between 2012 and 2014, the House of Representative elections, we saw the turnout plummet. Absolutely. The turnout in 2014 was very, very small, and indeed that low turnout right from the beginning challenged the legitimacy in the eyes of many of the elected House of Representatives. So real questions over what kind of turnout we might see in December. Municipal council elections have continued to take place in Libya, but with admittedly low turnout, despite the fact that many believe that ordinary Libyans seem to be more kind of connected to municipal councils in their areas. They feel more represented by them. So worrying signs in terms of how much faith ordinary Libyans have in electoral politics, and whether that will disencourage, if you like, turnout in December. So I think what's key here is, the higher Election Commission has been doing a lot of work in terms of preparing for elections. It's very aware of the need to encourage people to go out and vote. So I think more work will need to be done over the 10 months to basically prepare not just the infrastructure for elections, but also prepare the population to engage with the electoral process.
Karim, what do you think about this? What do your friends in Tripoli say about the elections in December?
In general, people like elections. The idea of going back to the people, I think there will be enough turnout. Depends of, as Mary was saying, depends of how things go now. If this government engages, does things, if things go better, and there is the possibility to start a radio, a journal, to do a speech in public. If all of these things have not been there for a long time, so now, if they restart, you might have some passion among the young, among the citizenship. It will not be like in 2012. I think that was the historical highest, but it will be definitely better than 2014. The issue is getting to elections. I'm not sure that elections are the right answer right now, but I don't want to get into that Pandora box. They have decided, Stephen Williams had made them sign that they will support elections on 24th of December, and let's imagine that there will be these elections. My idea will be for this government to work very hard in empowering a commission laws of the new assembly to study what this new assembly is supposed to do. Because let's remember that there is the issue of the constitution. We forgot that an incredibly powerful argument in the hands of those that do not want elections, because of their preference for the status quo. We haven't talked about this people, but there is a lot of people that would like to procrastinate the situation as it is now, where they have influence and power. Keep on going the same way. And you will see them. These are the ones who are talking about, no, well, we should have a constitution first, we should have a referendum for the constitution, then it has to be approved, which is a typical legal and even sensible argument. We need to have an election for the constitution and the constitution. Otherwise, there will be no reason to have a parliament. We have to look at this kind of maneuvers, how they're going to be played, because the issue of constitution is a theoretically an important issue. Nobody can deny it, but we all know. So you also all know that this is a way to avoid elections or push elections further ahead.
Sure. Arturo, what do you think about elections? It will be possible to have them in December, this next December?
I'm unable to say anything more. I think it is impossible to get people to vote, but it is true, as Mary said, that the legitimacy of the result will depend a lot on how many people believe in this democratic exercise. Now, I think that on this topic, on this specific topic, Europe, the United States, the United Nations will have to focus their efforts to ensure that elections are as credible and as free as possible. And this is why an European technical mission could be positive in our view.
But Arturo, what about Italy in this way? I mean, we had many problems with Haftar in the last few months with our fishermen. And here there is a question, there is a real question about the relationship that Italy will be able to have with this new, even quick government, and if something will be solved and fixed about, you know, this kind of fishing war that there is between more than Tripolitania, but let's say Cyrenaica and Italy. Do you think it will be possible to have a good solution about this? And do you think that Italy will have a real weight on this, you know, international, at this point, peace process?
No, the question of Italy, I think that Italy needs to have good relation with the government in Libya. The impression that is the backyard of Italy, no? So it is extremely important to try to Italy on two main topics, on two main goals. One is containing the migration. In the recent past, signing agreement to combat traffickers organizations, strengthening Libya's border controls, and in general preventing migrants from setting off from Libya's coast. And the second important objective has always been that of oil. And both of these interests coincide with a clear geographical direction that starts from Fezzan in the south of the country, and arrives in the coast of Tripolitania. And for this reason, Italy has always had be friends with those who rule, who was in control in Tripoli. However, when Italy saw that Haftar could conquer Tripoli and became more and more influential, Italy tried to have a position of equidistance. It was not a good idea, in my point of view, because our friend from Tripoli felt betrayed, and other international protectors arise. At that point, we create a vacuum, a political vacuum, which is filled by the Turks. And the Turks have become great protectors of Tripoli. Unfortunately, this is the reality. Now, what Italy can do is very difficult. I think that Italy alone cannot do much. Italy must give a political contribution to the European Union, to the European community, etc. And I think it can also leverage the Russian presence in Libya to have a great American commitment. I think it should do this. Italy is an excellent position because of mediation, because it has the opportunity to dialogue with all the actors involved, from Turkey to Egypt. We have good relation with all these actors involved in the crisis, but it must make its skills available to Europe and to a new multilateral vision, I think.
One interesting thing, and here we have a question about that. We haven't talked so much tonight about the neighbors of Libya. We're talking about the Emirates, we're talking about Russia, Turkey, and so on. But what about, for example, Karim, Algeria? Do you think that it can play a useful role in this situation in the next few months?
Algeria can play a role, but the point is that they have very strong problems internally. It's an elite problem in Algeria that they're having. So that's why they did not exercise, even in the past, a stronger stance. I was expecting that at the moment of the attack of Haftar to Tripoli, the Algerians would react, because this is the capital of a neighbor state being bombed by an aggressor. I was really expecting a very strong Algerian position. Instead, it was diplomatically strong. They said to use the attacks to cease, but they never condemned Haftar. They never took a very decisive position. And I think that is the problem of the fragility of the elite in power at that moment in 19, but also now. It seems they are getting their acts together and they are pushing for this diplomatic solution. So it's not a very strong role, but it's still important diplomatically, politically, to have Algerians on board for this new government and so on. And they can be of use, but much less because of this fragility, as I said, of the elite in command. Much less powerful position than they would have had this happened 10 years ago. With a strong Bouteflika in command, I have my doubts that Haftar would have done what he had done. But that's history.
I have a different question from Italy, and Giampiero Testolini is asking me, what is the role played by the Central Bank of Libya regarding the financial paralysis and the management of the revenues coming from the oil sector? Arturo, would you like to answer me first, and then?
I don't know very well the current situation of the Bank of Libya. We know very well how important are these institutions to take the Libyans together. I think the financial institution, the Central Bank of Libya, is one of the main reasons to stay together. But I have no news about the current situation. So I leave the floor to my colleague.
Mary, do you have some idea, more idea about that?
In recent months, we did see some positive developments in terms of the split between the central bank in Tripoli and a rival bank in eastern Libya. We saw meetings of the board of the central bank that hadn't taken place for quite some time. So there were signs that many internationals found quite heartening in terms of a momentum. So I think now, just like so many other issues, many questions in terms of how this new coming dispensation may affect that particular conversation, which is, has been part of the economic track that the UN has been overseeing. How this incoming dispensation may affect that conversation and several other key conversations as well, including the matter of the NOC and the oil revenues system.
Okay, I would like to close our wonderful and interesting conversation with a question. Are you positive? Mary, the first for you, and then I would like to listen to the other. Yes or no?
Well, I'm always cautiously, I'm always cautious when it comes to predicting or being optimistic about developments in Libya, having worked on Libya since 2011. But what I have been struck by in recent days is in conversations with a wide range of Libyans, and particularly struck in conversations with younger Libyans who very much wanted a change. So this idea of a change is as good as a rest. New faces, a new dispensation. Remember, the Government of National Accord has been in situ for 5 years now. That's a long time. Frustration had been growing to such a degree with the GNA. So I think that sense of change and the positivity that inevitably comes with change, even if it's to be dashed very soon after, that is something right now that a momentum can be built from. But let's see what the next days and weeks bring.
Okay, Karim?
At the end of the tunnel, and that is the light of the end of the tunnel, not a train that is coming against you 250 miles per hour. If that's the question, it really remains to be seen. I am cautiously optimistic that if everything goes the way it is supposed to go right now, the way things have been started, it might move toward finding at the beginning of a solution. It will be a very long walk for Libya to recover its stability, to recover its place, its harmony and internal order. But I'm positive that even these difficult steps will lead in the positive direction.
Arturo?
My reply is not much, but that's not new. It has been like this for 10 years. So, but I think we have a little more chance than in the past, and I think that the international situation is a little more favorable to a distension of relation between the most influential regional actors. For example, between Qatar and other Gulf countries, or between Egypt and Turkey. So this is an advantage that that must be exploited by the international community.
Okay, and with this I close here the communication, and I want to thank our guests. You have been extraordinary. Thank you for everything, and thank you to the audience. And so see you the next time, inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.